So Sri David Pichmuthu graduated from Indian School of Mines in mining engineering in the year 1960. So and joined the Tata Group as a postgraduate trainee and rose to the position of divisional manager and had 24 years experience in deep and gassy underground coal mines in Jaria coalfield. Then he was appointed as the managing director of Almora Magnesite, so in Lesser Himalayas of erstwhile UP state. Almora Magnesite is a joint venture of Tata's Steel Authority of India as well as the UP state government, UP State Industrial Development Corporation. And he has gained experience in coal mines and operation of dead burned magnesite kilns. Was the president of Federation of Indian Mineral Industries, the apex body of mineral and mines and mineral-based and mineral processing industries. So presently is a member of National Council of Institute of Engineers, the Grand Century World topmost professional body of engineers, and he is a life member of Geological and Metallurgical Institute and Mining Engineers Association of India. He was he was a very all-round sports person, represented Bihar in Ranji Trophy as well. So we welcome you, sir. So I hand over to Sri David Pichmuthu, sir, to present his keynote address. Sir, over to you, sir.
Good morning to all. I'm very happy to address you this morning. I must thank Mr. Dhananjay Reddy, Chairman of the Bangalore chapter of the Mining Engineers Association of India, the Executive Committee and the members of the MEAI for this opportunity. It's a new experience at least for me, to address online when normally we address auditorium with a good audience. So anyway, we have to start somewhere. So today we are starting here. Let me go straight to the subject. Yeah, so this, as Mr. Reddy has said, the subject is proactive policy and reactive approach in mining. So, see, the mineral policy, like all policies, defines the aims and
Nayak.
Saraz made it mute, I guess. You are mute. Please unmute.
Pichmuthu, sir, please unmute the audio, sir. Pichmuthu, sir, can you
hear me now?
Yeah, sir. Yeah, now we can.
Yeah, sir.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, as I was mentioning, the National Mineral Policy, first National Mineral Policy was in 1993, and this was after the liberalization measures brought in by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao and Dr. Manmohan Singh as the Finance Minister. And for the first time, it encouraged private investment in exploration and mining. It also welcomed the foreign participation in equity, that is through joint ventures and technology. The second National Mineral Policy came in 2008. This was as a result of the recommendations from the HODA Committee, and this was a watershed in our Indian mining policy. We had a well-defined strategy for mineral development. Procedures for mineral concessions were made transparent and seamless. Security of tenure, and mining as an economic activity in its own right and not merely as an ancillary to manufacturing. So these points are very important. I'd like you to pay attention to this because we'll come back to it in a different way later on. This transparency in grant of mineral concessions, security of tenure, and mining as an economic activity in its own right. These are very important things which are brought in for the first time in the second National Mineral Policy. current national mineral policy, there are many strange things in this. It came about after prodding of the Supreme Court. It came about after the 2015 amendment to MMDR Act. Usually the policy is announced first and then the legislation is brought in. This time it was the other way around. The MMDR Act of 2015 is totally out of tune with the National Mineral Policy 2008, which was in existence at that time. It was used to justify, the policy was used to justify the arbitrary provisions of 2015 Act. One most glaring one was the arbitrary termination of mining leases by 2020. The concept of captive mining. This captive mining is a very strange thing which is known only in India. You don't find it anywhere in Australia or Canada or any of the progressive mineral rich countries. This has been brought in, came in the Act, and then it has come into the policy also. And very unfortunately, this shows the amount of interest taken in this policy. Whole paragraphs have been lifted from the National Mineral Policy of 2008 and inserted here. Then,
विद्यार्थी सर, सर आपको ऑडियो जस्ट म्यूट कर दीजिए ना विद्यार्थी सर.
Okay.
And the point D, kindly note, there were pious hopes in the policy that there would be 200% increase in value and 50% reduction in trade deficit in 7 years. Value of minerals, 200% increase. Now already 5 years have passed and you can see what is the increase. Same thing with the reduction in trade deficit also. This was supposed to be achieved in 7 years. Along with that, National Mineral Exploration Policy also came in again as a offshoot of the MMDR Act. This Section 9C brought in the concept of National Mineral Exploration Trust and the NMET rules of 2015. Here, the outcome is that exploration has been virtually nationalized, and exploration for deep-seated minerals has been, as a result, virtually halted. Now, this is something also which is going to affect us in the long run very badly. Hardly anything has been, any new mineral deposit has been discovered in the last 5 years, and I don't think it's going to be discovered very soon unless this policy is changed. See this, now we come to the MMDR Act as such. We talked about the policy. 1957, the Mines and Minerals Regulation and Development Act was brought in. This is of course the second act. First came in 1948. In 1957, it came as a result of the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956. The major points are all the major minerals which are in Schedule A have to be in public sector, and all the minor minerals in Schedule B, public and private sector could participate. The first major amendment came in 1972, and it enhanced the government control even further. In 1986, it became even more government control. And ultimately, that, as I said, 1991, the liberalization was brought in, and then the first National Mineral Policy of 1993 came in. As a result of that, the next major amendment came in 1994. For the first time, private sector was allowed in 13 major minerals, and foreign participation in exploration and mining in the form of technology and equities were also allowed. The next major amendments came in 1999 because the government found that not much of investment was coming, and we brought in the concept of the development taking precedence over regulation. So the MMRD Act became there's a typo there, it became MMDR Act. MMRD has become MMDR Act. Here, for the first time, the concept of reconnaissance was brought in as a distinct stage prior to prospecting. Then powers were granted to states to renew PLs and MLs and also transfer MLs of minerals in Part C. Summing up, 1972 and 1986 amendments tightened government control. 94 and 99, the amendments were loosened. After this, again, government thought there had to be some changes because the 2008 National Mineral Policy came in. So a bill was introduced in 2011, both in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha in December 2011. And it was immediately referred to a parliamentary standing committee. This was headed by Sri Kalyan Banerjee, the Trinamool Congress MP. They held widespread consultations and hearings in 2012 and 2013. Every professional body, individuals, companies were all given an opportunity to hear this. And this is the right way to go about it. But unfortunately, it resulted in a lot of delay. And ultimately, May 2013, the report of the Parliamentary Standing Committee was placed in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. And by the time they could even deliberate on it, as you all know, the May 2014, the UP government fell, and that was the end of this bill. Now, in the 2015 amendments, there were very major changes brought in. First of all, it went totally against the spirit of National Mineral Policy of 2008 and liberalization introduced since 1991. The biggest casualty has been in exploration, which has virtually been nationalized. Arbitrary provisions like termination of leases in 2020, limiting the lease period to 50 years. See, this is something which is unheard of anywhere. Normally, once a lease is granted, as long as the lease is being operated in a proper scientific manner, the lease is allowed to be renewed till the reserves are over. But here, after 50 years, there is the end of it. But again, there's a difference between government companies or PSUs and private companies. So the private companies, the lease will be over. Then the other thing is auction as the sole mode of grant of MLs. The next one is the non-exclusive RP. This is also hampering reconnaissance permits because I don't think there are any takers for this because A gets an RP. After some time, B can also come in and explore in the same area. And after the exploration is over, the original RP holder and others have to compete and they have to bid for the composite license, which is a prospecting license come mining lease. So whatever the efforts this person has put in or this company has put in, there is no surety that he will ultimately get the prospecting license and the lease. So this is definitely not attracting any major company. Then this concept of captive mines. This is again something unheard of anywhere. So earlier we had public sector, private sector, and now we have a third one called captive mines also. This is something which is unheard of in other countries. The auction system. See, we hear many times that the Supreme Court has ordered, so that's why we're doing auctioning, but that's not correct. The 5-judge Constitution bench of the Supreme Court categorically said auction could not be the sole method of allocation of natural resources. It could be one of the methods. But in the 2015 Amended Act, auction has become the preferred mode of allocation, ostensibly for transparency. But actually, the actual motive is to maximize revenue generation by the two-step ascending forward auction. So the immediate thing is the government gets revenue, but what is it going to do to the long-term health of the industry is not being considered. This auction system, successful bidders for captive iron ore blocks in Jharkhand, Odisha and Karnataka will end up paying more than the current market prices. This is because of the premium which is charged and there's a mad rush for getting that. So ultimately they'll be paying more, and standalone miners will not be able to pay up this much. So only the captive, that means the manufacturers, the steel makers, who have, they can mine these things because they'll absorb this in the total cost of steel. And steel, there's hardly any problem. They can keep on raising prices. It's not an issue for them. So ultimately what happens, the consumer has to pay the price. He'll be paying more for the steel ultimately. Limiting the tenure of my MLs to 50 years, and then mine goes up for auction. So government gets another chance to get some more revenue. But the downside of it is once the mine operator knows that the lease is going to end, he is only going to take out the cream. He is not going to have a balanced extraction. So the richer grades will be extracted by him and the leaner grades will be left. This is again detrimental to scientific mining. And the result in all this is the state governments, that is different state governments, have made around 100 attempts for auctioning. Only 53 mines have been auctioned in the last 5 years, and only 3 small mines have commenced production. Prior to this is something which I would like to talk. We have talked about the policy and the act. Now, what is happening on the ground? What the lease applicants or the mineral concessions have to face is just being highlighted here. Section 10A-2B of the MMDR Act states, saying it in brief, it's a fairly long section. Prior to this promulgation of the 2015 Amended Act, if an RP holder has been granted the RP, he shall have a right to obtain a PL followed by ML, which is quite justifiable. If a PL has been granted, he shall have a right to obtain ML. This is what the Act says, and it's very clear. There is no ambiguity in that. And Rule 5R or 5.6 of the MCR 2016, this also specifies the timelines. Application from the RP holder, the state government within 60 days has to grant the PL or forward it to the central government in case of minerals specified in Part C of first schedule of the Act. Similarly, Rule 7.6 of the MCR 2016, the application from PL holder, again the state government within 60 days has to grant the ML or forward it to the central government, again in regard to the minerals specified in Part C of the first schedule of the Act. And Section 10A-2C of the Act, where the central government has communicated previous approval or LOI has been issued by state government to grant ML before the commencement of the Act, the ML shall be granted within 2 years. Here, of course, there is a time specified, but in case of RP and PL, there is no time limit specified. That means there is no sunset clause. So even today, those applications are live. But unfortunately, even after 5 years, none of those applications have been processed and the license or the lease granted, as the case may be. Now we come to the other aspect which is creating a lot of problem for the mining industry is the taxation. As it is, the royalty rates are among the highest in the world. Then on top of that, DMF is 10% of the royalty, NMET is 2% of royalty, GST 18%, and Karnataka and Goa there is an extra 10% tax. So even for those mines which are not in Karnataka and Goa, the effective tax rate is 55%. In Karnataka and Goa it will be 65%, which makes it totally uneconomical. In mineral-rich progressive countries like Australia and all that, Canada, it varies between 35 to 40%. And on top of that, there is an export-import policy which is again tilted in favor of manufacturers. Import duty for steel is 5 to 12%, and there is a talk the steel lobby is pressing for making it 15%. But for iron ore, it's 2.5%. That means you are encouraging the import of iron ore and make it cheap so that the steel companies can obtain cheap ore. But at the same time, the imports are discouraged by higher duties. This again, ultimately the cost is paid by the consumer. Then export duty, again, is very strange. Export of iron ore richer than 62% is prohibited. 58 to 62%, which is a very welcome commodity in the international markets, the government has slapped an export duty of 30%. So it becomes straight away uneconomical. So what is happening? Most of the mines, particularly in Orissa, there are huge stacks of particularly of fines of this grade, which there are no takers in India because Indian steel makers are very fussy. They want iron ore of 62 plus only. So all this is, latest I don't know, but last time I got a report, it was total stocks are something like 130 to 140 million tons lying at pithead. Now again, this doesn't make any sense. And I'm just giving you a bidder's perspective. This was sent to me by somebody, usually for coal. Bids submission stage, tender fee is rupees 5 lakhs. This is non-refundable. So whether you get it finally or not, this 5 lakhs is to be paid up. Security 20% upfront if it's an explored block, 25% of exploration amount. This upfront amount is 0.5% of the value of the estimated resources. That is the geological reserve in tons multiplied by the representative price of the grade. On execution of agreement, first installment of 25%. On execution of ML, second installment of 25%. On opening the coal mine, third installment. On permission commence coal mining, fourth installment. That means even before a ton of coal can be extracted, all this amount has to be paid to the government. So which is again, don't think it's a very justifiable thing, but that is how the system there has been tweaked. So the auction system per se may not be that unwelcoming for the miners, but the way it has been structured, it is totally difficult for the bidders. Then on top of that, there's a performance bank guarantee, 65% of 1 year royalty at peak production plus 1 year revenue. This goes to the state government.
That's it, sir.
No, I want to show something on the ground realities, where we have come to at this time. In 1980s, both India and China were producing 3 tons per annum. Today, China is producing more than 440 tons, and India has come down to 2 tons. Imports of gold value is rupees 3 lakh crores. Other minerals, another 56,000 crores. The value of minerals, this is other than fuel and minor minerals. Import is 3,56,000 crores. Domestic production is only 60,000 crores. That means that we are importing the value is 6 times of the domestic value. And one specific thing I want to bring to your notice before I close is about a place called Ganajur. It's a mining lease. It's about 11 kilometers north of Haveri town in Karnataka. Deccan Exploration Services Private Limited discovered by reconnaissance a gold prospect in 2003 led by Dr. V.N. Vasudev. 2004 and 2005 they had detailed drilling and the PL was granted. Government of Karnataka recommended for ML. IBM has classified the reserve under UNFC as 121 mineable reserve category. 2015 the MOM approved the grant of ML and wrote to the state. 2017 the Ministry of Mines issued a reminder to the state. State is keeping the matter still in abeyance. So this is the situation as of today. Thank you.
So thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So